Thank you, everyone, and good day to those of you in the US and Europe. Good evening in Africa. Thank you so much for joining us today in this conversation about gender-smart innovation and digital transformation. I'm Steve Mark, and I have the privilege of serving as the board chair for MicroLoan Foundation USA. And I'm joined by four incredible panelists from whom you will hear a lot of insights and information that hopefully will be additive to your understanding of both the issues as well as some of the solutions which are being put in place today and in the future to help close the gender gap in financial inclusion and financial service availability for women. Elizabeth Kiyamba, financial sector analyst at CGAP, the consultative group to assist the poor, which is a think tank within the World Bank. Tinashe Sande, the gender mainstreaming and coordination specialist at UN Women. Charity Luchembe Chikumbi, director of policy and digital financial services at FSD Zambia, and Medha Wilson, the group CEO of MicroLoan Foundation. I'll start with just a little bit of information about MicroLoan Foundation. MicroLoan Foundation is a poverty alleviation and economic development organization providing financial literacy training, digital solutions, and microloans to women entrepreneurs in Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. We've been supporting women facing poverty for 20 years. And in that time, we've been able to provide training and lending to 324,000 women who have built businesses with our support. Those women in turn have on average 4 dependents. So we've been able to support a total of 1.6 million lives touched and helping their families have increased access to food, attending the ability to attend school, and to more participate in the financial system. We're continually expanding our range of digital solutions, and Medha Wilson will be speaking more about that in detail a little bit later on. So why are we here? A little bit of background. Appropriate financial solutions are really a critical component to improving the economic well-being of people across the world. And the world's poor typically lack access to basic financial solutions and are traditionally underserved by the financial services system and the lack of appropriate products and solutions. Among the world's poor, women are typically the hardest hit and have the greatest lack of financial education and opportunity. Women represent 50% of the world's population, but own less than 2% of the assets. And there's a growing and real awareness of the disproportionate impact on women from disasters and shocks. The pandemic of the past 2 years has certainly illustrated this in very stark terms, where women lost their incomes at a much more than men as they are overrepresented in low margin retail businesses and have a disproportionate responsibility in caregiving, as men are often the primary earners in the household. They've needed to leave the workforce at much greater rates. Women also lag behind men in several key areas: literacy rates in general, ownership of mobile devices. And in the last decade, as an example, sub-Saharan Africa has witnessed an impressive growth in mobile phone usage, with 73% of the population having a mobile phone subscription. However, the gender gap persists, and 13% of women in sub-Saharan Africa are less likely to own a phone than men. It's harder for them to obtain a government ID, which can be a real hindrance in obtaining services from both governments as well as other organizations. On the positive side, many organizations are using this awareness to examine the root causes of these issues and develop solutions that are appropriate for women to help close the gender gap and provide the support that would be required. The pandemic, of course, has accelerated digitization. This has enabled governments, businesses, and NGOs to more effectively leverage digital solutions for money transfer, financial products such as saving and microinsurance, and of course, government payments. In light of these challenges, there are a number of organizations that are doing really interesting things to focus on financial inclusion and develop appropriate solutions for the poor and especially for women. We'll hear from some of them today. So the objectives of our discussion today are to set the backdrop around some of the key issues that are facing women in financial inclusion and obtaining digital financial solutions, and then really outline some of the solutions that are being put into place. We will be monitoring the chat throughout our conversation today. So if you have questions or things you're interested in, please put them in the chat. We will also be dropping into the chat links for you to read further and explore more of this information at your availabiliability. So the challenges, I'll just spend another minute on, and then I would really like to get to our panelists. There are a wide range of challenges that touch on multiple of the sustainable development goals. Unfortunately, a relatively small number of programs, small percentage of programs, really target specific solutions that are appropriate for women, given the realities that they face. From a backdrop perspective, the Gates Foundation and the Center for Financial Inclusion from Axion have estimated that 1.7 billion low-income people around the world remain excluded from formal financial services, and over 1 billion of these are women. That's a greater share of the excluded population than the share of women in the population at large. Most financial products were not designed with women in mind. Why is this important? Per the UN Women, we have someone here talking with us today. If the global gender gap in financial inclusion could be closed, which is about 9% today, and it has remained the same for the last decade plus, there could be a diminishment, there could be an increase in global GDP by 6%, which would raise the global economy to $5 trillion and would double the contribution of women in the economy. So let's get to our panelists. I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your perspectives. First, we're going to cover we're going to take two main areas in this conversation. First, we'll talk about, as I mentioned, some of the issues and the backdrop, and then we'll get to some of the solutions that people are putting into place. So why is this so hard? What are the key challenges? And I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. I'll just take a minute to do that. I'm really honored to be joined by several leading thinkers and practitioners in the area of financial literacy and inclusion, equality, and digital solution development. We'll cover perspectives from a policy and advocacy, systems change level, as well as from on-the-ground solutions that are being delivered in various countries across Africa. Elizabeth Kiyamba is the financial sector analyst at the CGAP. She engages with funders, global advocacy bodies, and supports organizations to provide guidance and advocate for effective financial inclusion. She works on projects in digital finance solutions for last mile clients, micro and small enterprises, and finance, and the linkages between financial services, improved livelihoods, and access to basic services. Before joining CGAP, Elizabeth was the FSD network manager at FSD Africa, and we'll be hearing from FSD Zambia today, where she managed a portfolio of projects covering various financial sector themes. Elizabeth holds a Master of Arts degree in Development Management from Ruhr University and a bachelor's degree in Business Management and Finance and Banking from Moi University, and she is a certified project manager and accountant. Tinashe Sande, who is the Gender Mainstreaming and Coordination Specialist at UN Women, holds an MSc in Development Studies and has more than 10 years of experience in the gender sector in Zimbabwe, South Africa, Mozambique, and Zambia, stemming from several consulting assignments conducted with key organizations such as the SADC Gender Unit, USAID, World Vision, and FAN-RPAN. Tinashe is the UN Women Gender Mainstreaming and Coordination Specialist responsible for gender equality and women's empowerment across the UN. She was previously with GMAT Development Consultants, where she was the Chief Operating Officer. Cherry Chikumbi is the Director of Policy and Digital Financial Services at FSD Zambia. She's a certified digital financial practitioner and undertakes the full range of activities related to advocacy and implementation support of new policies, practices, and regulations for digital finance in Zambia. By supporting the Bank of Zambia, Ministry of Finance, and Zambian Information, Communication, and Technology Authority. She also works with in the digital financial services market, all kinds of financial services providers and fintechs, aggregators, accelerators, and innovators. She has many years of experience as a central banker at the Bank of Zambia in various divisions, including 12 years in payment systems. Charity holds an MBA from Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University and a BSc in computing from Greenwich University, among many other professional skills. You can already see this could be a 3-hour conversation with all the experience we have represented here. Finally, Medha Wilson, who's the group CEO of the MicroLoan Foundation. She oversees the activities of MicroLoan's operations in Africa and is responsible for developing the overall strategy for the group, which includes digital transformation and product expansion to better serve some of the world's most financially excluded women. She serves on the board of the 3 MicroLoan subsidiaries in Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. Medha has extensive experience in financial inclusion in both senior operational and investment management roles in emerging and frontier markets across Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. Medha is a qualified chartered accountant and holds a degree in econometrics and mathematical economics from the London School of Economics. I'm tired just saying all those great credentials. So what we're going to do is, as I mentioned earlier, we're really going to cover 2 basic areas, an overview of the issues and the backdrop for the solutions that are being developed. And then we'll talk a little bit more about solutions. So we're going to start by framing some of the issues and really ground us in our purpose of the conversation. Why is this so hard? What are some of the unique challenges facing women and, frankly, the organizations that are looking to provide for women? We'll focus on these areas and why digital financial solutions for women is so important, and what are the unique challenges of creating a gender-specific program focusing on women. So Elizabeth, there's a lot of work you're doing at CGAP, and would love to hear your perspectives on the core issues from a CGAP perspective that you're looking to address.
Thanks, Steve. I think there are quite a number of issues here, and I think you framed them quite well in your introduction. And I think our work is just to expound a little bit on, how the issues that you raised. And, you talked about lower rates of financial literacy and digital skills among women in comparison to men. And this is a key issue. And I'll just push a little bit further on that and say that there are some issues around information asymmetries or poor communication, especially when it comes to digital financial services. So you'll find that there's poor communication on DFS requirements and process from ecosystem players. Simple things like the information that agents have about the cash in, cash out process. And this makes women lose trust in these financial services. And, there's a need to look closely into this and align the information or access to information by women so that they can trust, some of these DFS better and they can utilize them comfortably. Then you talked about caregiving and household responsibilities that tend to surround women's lives. And for us at CGAP, we have a very big focus on social norms and gender norms. And, just to lay this out, social norms and gender norms are the expectations or perceived rules on how individuals need to behave in a community or society based on their gender identity. So thinking about this a little bit more is why don't women-owned micro enterprises grow? And you have to think about this issue, with a mindset of these caregiving and household responsibilities that women have. So women want to be able to close shop quickly and go pick a kid from school, or they have other responsibilities that they need to attend to. So how can digital financial services meet women in this area of their need, or within this ecosystem where they live in, or within these requirements of their lives? So I would say that for us at CGAP, there's a huge focus on embedding social norms within financial inclusion programming, and we can talk more about that as we proceed.
Thank you so much. I think as the discussion goes along, we'll hear from various people that there's, even with a focus on similar issues, the orientation of each organization and sort of, I would say that the level or the direction that each of the organizations is coming from will really just display the rich array of different types of solutions that really need to be put into place, because it's a whole system. So as an example, having a mobile phone access is wonderful if there's infrastructure available, but as you mentioned, are the access points affordable and available to women as well as men? There's a whole series of questions that all have to be interrelated for the system to work. That's a great, I think, segue to Tinashe, some of the perspective that you see from the UN Women standpoint, also a global organization, of course, that has a broad range of views and activities. Tinashe?
All right, thanks so much, Steve, and hello to everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. So it's really a pleasure to be here and to be part of this panel, just to really look at women in the digital space as well as digital transformation. So indeed, I work for UN Women in Zimbabwe and as a coordination specialist there. And we work in a wide array of areas, including women's economic empowerment, and which is where we really find a lot of digital financing and digital transformation playing a huge role. Particularly when you look at the context that we're in around COVID-19 and how just the digital space has become even more important in the frame of COVID-19 and in the frame of the lockdown and trying to interact and transact in that space. So we're seeing opportunities for women in the digital space, where there are opportunities for them to modify their existing businesses, to create even new ones, as well as to improve their customer experiences with digital transformation, as well as digital financing. For UN Women and the UN in general, leaving no one behind is a critical principle for us, where women you'll find are, usually the ones left behind, women in rural areas, women in hard to reach areas, particularly when it comes to digital finance and digital transformation. There is a huge disparity between men and women in this space. And for us in our context in Zimbabwe, this particularly stems from things like poor participation in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, something that our government is really trying to push, as well as the UN in general, just to improve women's access to, or even women's experiences with STEM subjects from primary school through to secondary school, even in tertiary education. You'll also find when it comes to digital finance, digital transformation, there is a general lack of role model and leadership in these spaces. You'll find not a lot of women work there. As well as several biases around just even using a mobile phone, using the computer, and engaging in digital finance, loans, and things like that. Then, the general connectivity issues in Africa in general, but particularly in Southern Africa and in Zimbabwe, also come into play when we talk about digital financing and digital transformation. So, our interests as UN Women are that, women are not left behind in the opportunities that are created by digital transformation. In Zimbabwe, you'll find we've got a huge cash crisis. And we've found that digital advancements, including a revolution in mobile money, have come in to close that gap and ensure that we can transact even without cash. the World Bank, I know right now, estimates that 96% of our transactions in Zimbabwe are actually done via mobile money or via a digital platform. So you'll find that really it plays such a critical role that women are engaged and are capacitated in this space. Just to talk about just a little bit of our work in UN Women to bridge this gap. We are, in one of our projects, we have engaged in supporting the construction of safe markets, and these are around gender-based violence, to inhibit gender-based violence and ensure that women can transact in a safer space. But we've also embedded the issue of transactions via mobile money, trainings in transactions via mobile money, and engaging in digital spaces as well as digital marketing. We also have knowledge hubs that we've created in urban poor environments, in urban poor communities, where we've got knowledge hubs for women, where they can interface with, with digital technologies. So I think I'll end here and just let other people speak, but this is the frame of mind we come in with as UN Women.
Thank you so much. As you heard from Elizabeth and Tinashe, big picture solutions and a large view of the issues. We heard about knowledge hubs. We heard about framing the whole market for greater STEM education, things that are very global in nature, with either in a country or a region or globally. And these are just incredibly important elements in order for organizations that are closer and closer to delivering local solutions have in place in order to have those solutions be able to have the impact that they could, because it's the entire environment that is really critical for these solutions to be successful. So now let's move over to another Z, to Zambia. Charity, your perspectives on some of the core issues that you and FSD Zambia are facing. I think probably a lot of similarities, but very interested because every country is quite a different context.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you very much to the audience and the organizers of the MicroLoan Foundation for the opportunity to share a little of what's happening in Zambia. As the ground has already been set, it's about not leaving anyone behind in the development. And we see as FSD that regulation, creating an enabling environment was very key in the beginning, because how were we going to grow digital financial services when the regulation was absent or not so supportive? So the first thing that we did was to create an environment where DFS could grow by reviewing the KYC, Know Your Customer. So the Know Your Customer became tiered to favor those who have a lighter entry point, because previously the market was heavily heavy of banks. So now we saw mobile network operators coming into the market and third-party companies like Zona coming into the market, and they've done a remarkable job. So as FSD, we worked with the central bank, with the Ministry of Finance to create a tiered kind of Know Your Customer, so that now it was not a requirement for proof of address and other heavy KYCs, but somebody could just use their national ID or maybe no ID whatsoever, depending on the threshold. So working with the regulators, we've been able to have a breakthrough, and the result has been a growth in women accessing financial services, because the restriction of IDs and so on were taken care of. Secondly, it is about devices. So we know that actually for Zambia, for women in the urban areas, it's almost 90% that have access to mobile phones. But that's not so for the rural areas, where it stood about 50%. So COVID being a very good accelerator, when it came, we as FSD reasoned that the women in the rural area also deserved to learn about the dangers of COVID and learn on how they could safeguard their families. And government was doing a lot to send out messages to everyone to educate them. And yet the women without a handset, because that was the mode, the channel for sending the messages, we knew they would be vulnerable. So we took up a project we called Cash Shake-Off to distribute handsets, affordable USSD-based handsets to rural areas in Zambia. And luckily our country is not so heavily populated, and a number of 44,000 handsets were given, including solar chargers. And this brought a very big transformation, because not only could the women receive health messages to make them aware of the growth of COVID-19, but also it enabled them to have access to financial services. Now they could send money to their children in boarding schools. Now they could receive messages. They could also use the same device to find out about markets for their produce and follow up. So we've seen that empowering women with devices is a very great step to reaching out, and especially when the environment is also taken care of, because we saw that national IDs are paper-based, and for most women who don't use these for business every day, like the main folk may do, when they get a piece of paper, which is an ID, they'll put it in a secure place, in inverted commas, and when they need to use it, they can't remember. So the country is now working on a biometric ID to try and liberate the women with the ID that they can use for access to financial services, especially when they're sending money in a certain threshold. Because again, women here have started savings groups, especially in a province under chiefs. The chiefs have created savings groups, units where women bring their money together, and they've already started doing it on a mobile phone device. So the savings groups have been digitized. So they have enough money that they can raise to uplift them from poverty in the savings group. So the handset gives them an access to an e-wallet where they can save money. It gives them an access to information, and the tiered system also helps them to cash in, cash out with a nearby agent without having to carry an ID all the time. PIN numbers are good enough. Of course, there are issues of fraud, but really we've seen a very exponential growth of digital financial services because of these interventions that we have worked with. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks. And you just think about some of the information that Charity just shared, with 90% of women in urban areas having access to a mobile phone versus 50% in the rural areas. That's a great transition to some remarks from Medha Wilson, who's the CEO of MicroLoan Foundation. At MicroLoan Foundation, we work primarily with women in rural areas, and the challenges both of having the handsets in the case of that you shared, Charity, but also the infrastructure availability in the more rural areas is a challenge that I know MicroLoan has been facing for a while. And so maybe you can just talk about some of the core issues that we are looking at through MicroLoan.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and thank you to the other panelists as well. I think, as you said, this discussion is particularly relevant to us because we work 100% with women in some of the most disconnected regions in these countries. And many of these women have not had access to formal financial services in the past, let alone, digital services. But going, forward, a core part of our strategy is digital transformation. And we do recognize that this is going to fundamentally change how we operate as a business, but more importantly, how it impacts our end clients in terms of their access to finance. And I think if it is set up right, it really has the potential to be a game changer in terms of, bridging that gender divide, both in the digital space, but in the overall financial inclusion landscape as well. So, interestingly enough, Charity and Tinashe have spoken about some of the countries, we work in, and even though they're geographically quite close, they're quite different in terms of the DFS landscape. And we face different challenges based on the state of, the inherent characteristics of each economy, but also the state of regulation within each country. So in Zimbabwe, as Tinashe pointed out, it's largely a cashless economy because of the constraints that exist there. So women, the digital divide is perhaps less so in, compared to Zambia or Malawi, because most women have already adopted mobile money because that's the only viable way of transacting in the economy. And in Zambia, for example, we've had, with COVID, which has been the accelerator, like Charity has talked about, we've seen a big push, both from a regulation point of view, but also like subsidizing the cost of phones, reducing data costs, et cetera, has just made it more accessible to women. Because at the end of the day, if you think, one of the reasons why women don't adopt DFS is also because they have less disposable income than men. And so they don't qualify to open accounts within, a mobile money account, for example, or the cost of transacting is too restrictive. But when some of those issues are addressed, then it changes the landscape and it changes the way people start viewing this, and especially women who are largely excluded. And in Malawi, we have a slightly different context because, ID requirements and all of this is slightly onerous, but there was a big push for national IDs back in 2016. So we're seeing more and more of our clients have access to that. But the mobile network coverage is not as extensive as, say, Zambia. We have a couple of operators. Airtel, for example, operates in most regions. But it is still, it's a much poorer country. And that translates into how DFS is adopted. Literacy level, education levels also has a direct correlation. So in Zimbabwe, we find the highest uptake compared to, followed by Zambia and then Malawi. So there are different challenges depending on the context. But also there are, on a broad level across all countries, we find there are challenges even within the operating framework. Because we're dependent on agents in some of the most rural regions of the country. And many of these agents, liquidity management is an ongoing issue. Perhaps for over a decade, we still see this as an ongoing issue. So if we want people to transact, how do we improve that? In Zambia, for example, now we've rolled out mobile money across most of our branches. Both in terms of disbursements and repayments. And it's largely seen as a cash in, cash out. But the behavior on the ground is still very much cash-based. That's because within the ecosystem, we don't have all actors or players being part of the digital landscape. So if, we're able to disburse through mobile means, but the client at the end of the day still requires cash to go and buy stock, for example. That could change dramatically if the person that they're buying stock from also can transact with them directly through a mobile network. And that's where interoperability becomes, quite a key feature in making this a success. So many times clients, the questions that clients ask us is, oh, but we have to pay fees for disbursing. And they see this as a cost and they see this as a hindrance in adoption as well. But that's where client education becomes quite key, because we're saying, what are the trade-offs here? Here you are able to transact through a mobile network, not physically having to go to a bank to withdraw cash, but at the same time, so you're saving on transport costs, possibly. You're saving, you're transacting at a time when it's convenient to you. So there's significant opportunity cost there as well, because many of these women, like we said, they have multiple responsibilities within the household. And if they have to go physically to a place to bring, take out cash, that's really taking away time from the other roles and responsibilities that they have. So it's really about educating the clients as well along the way to increase adoption. But so these challenges can be addressed but I think, it's very country specific and context specific. And we have to work with all the actors within the ecosystem to make this a success.
Thank you all. Clearly a wide array of issues, from policy to social norms to just the tactical infrastructure and availability. Maybe we can take one more minute. We didn't hear much about trust and confidence of women in digital solutions. And I would just put this out to anybody who would like to make a comment on that, because it feeds into the whole system of how these things not only can be available and be able to be supported through infrastructure and policy, but women need to be in a position where they're comfortable actually using the solutions. So whoever would like to address that, maybe take a moment.
Yeah, I can go.
Sure.
So from our perspective, yes, this is a big part of how we see this translate into better adoption rates by women, because there are, we talked about this gender and cultural norms which are present, and we have to be mindful when rolling out new services and products. And within the digital landscape, women, if it's, they're less literate or less educated or not exposed to something because of their gender, they're less likely to trust it. So that's where, we have a very core component of our program is training and education. And as part of that exercise now, as we roll out mobile money and other digital services, it's important that there's this ongoing interaction with clients to explain the benefits and sometimes the risks associated with transacting through these channels. The other thing is, within the cultural norms, many of the agents that operate in the rural areas are men. So we have to consider, can adoption be increased if there are women agents or women-led businesses who double up as agents, where women feel safer to transact. And that's another way we're trying to address this. And in Zambia, to give you a specific example, we're looking increasing at savings group. I think Charity also alluded to this in her part, where we are looking to create a safe platform for clients to save, but we're using components that are already known to the client. So if they're transacting through a mobile network operator, we're using that same network to then create a savings platform. And it's possible in the context of Zambia for us to do that, because we work very closely with the network operator. We have a lot of flexibility. We can customize it to make it more suitable for our clients. So these are just some of the examples that we are using to improve adoption by women clients of digital financial services.
Great, thank you. Would anybody like to add anything to that, or we can move on to our next segment?
Yeah.
Elizabeth,
So I was just going to add that at CGAP, some of my colleagues have been working on identifying DFS consumer risks and understanding, how these risks are affecting women's interaction and trust with digital financial services. And they've just recently concluded a study on DFS consumer risks and published a typology of about 66 DFS consumer risks. And the research is showing that women tend to be more vulnerable to these risks in comparison to men. And so there are a few actions that different stakeholders within this financial inclusion community that can take. So we have the need for financial service providers to be aware of these DFS risks and how they affect women's interactions with their services. We have the need for regulators to also consider or require reporting against these risks so that they are highlighted and actions can be taken to manage these risks and enable women to interact better with digital financial services. And we also need to influence consumer groups to push for awareness and education among consumers on what's the key information, what's the right information, how do I go about approaching an agent? How do I go about transacting on my mobile phone? So this is another opportunity and way in which different stakeholders within the financial inclusion community and the financial sector can specifically address the issue of trust for DFS.
That's so important. And I think it's wonderful that 66 risks, there's a lot of consumer risks to consider, and how those may differ across men and women is not an insignificant fact of making sure that they are handled in an appropriate way for the right type of audience. Okay, why don't we shift to our next set of discussions? And again, we feel free to make this interactive. If you have a question of each other, jump in. Maybe we can start, as we said, we'll do a reverse order. Medha, if you can talk about some of the things that MicroLoan is doing today and what MicroLoan is looking at in the future to address creating more opportunity and solutions, the digital solutions that are available to women. And we've heard how important that is in places like Zimbabwe, where 96% of transactions are handled on some sort of digital platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really recognize that, like I mentioned earlier, this really has the potential to be a game changer for us. But how do we apply that right gender lens to get it right? And I think, in all of our countries, I mean, there are different stages of adoption of DFS, I suppose, but I think we generally want to use this mobile money platform to do more than just what we're doing at the minute. So just the disbursements, repayments. How can we leverage this to enhance the overall customer experience ultimately? So I talked about the savings platform that we developed in Zambia, which has been really instrumental in broadening our scope of services for our clients and making it suitable based on what they require and need, versus us dictating what they need. And similarly, I mean, agriculture is really a big part of our future expansion strategy in terms of our products that we offer to clients. And value chain digitization is going to be a very key component of this. So can we do more in terms of providing microinsurance to clients, like weather index, et cetera, through digital platforms? Also, when we say, value chain digitization means that every player within that ecosystem can interact with each other on a digital platform. And can we provide other services that may be useful to clients, more information on smallholder farming and best practices, et cetera, information about markets and pricing, and all of that information would be really invaluable. So the potential to do more is huge. We're also looking at MSME space, because some of our clients are moving into sort of the micro or small medium enterprise space, which I think one of the challenges for women clients is that they're less likely to own assets. We've seen that empirically. So that again serves as a hindrance for them accessing finance because of the lack of collateral. Having a digital finance platform where there are other transactions that are recorded serves as a viable alternative to that asset collateral. So there is a little bit of an established credit history. So again, and I'll go, there are lots of ways we can explore that to provide more to our women clients. So for example, a credit scoring model is something that we'll be working on, especially in the agriculture and SME space going forward. And we think we can overcome some of these other obstacles we face for women accessing finance as a result of that. But I think ultimately, I mean, the question really is going 100% digital our end goal? And from our perspective, MicroLoan's perspective, we find that, a key component of our operations is the face-to-face interaction. So there are some non-digital aspects of operations that are really important to consider alongside the big digital wins. And, group cohesion, for example, it's because people meet in groups We have that as a collateral. That translates into better repayments, but also translates into better experiences for clients. Ultimately, the training aspect is again a win-win for both the organization as well as client. And perhaps if we're applying a gender-specific approach to this, having a hybrid model actually works in the long run. And I think, you know, we've sort of come back to this, that striking the right balance between high tech and high touch is perhaps essential for success. Thanks.
Absolutely. There is such a need for direct training and interaction and mentoring through all aspects of this, that I think that's a really good point. And I think that's a great segue, Charity, to some of what FSD Zambia is doing. You mentioned working with other organizations, getting a very large number, 44,000, 50,000 handsets to the people who need it. Maybe you could talk a little bit more in depth about that and some of the other solutions that FSD Zambia is looking at, and how you do manage the high tech and high touch aspect.
Okay, thank you very much. So we decided that giving handsets to women empowers them to have access to savings. You realize that if they're going to break out of their limitations financially, they better have an access to put their money aside, because they were saving in the home, in a mattress, in a pillow, and their sons, their children, and their husbands would have access to that money. So even if they would like to grow money over a period of time to help them start a small business, or to help them save up for school fees, it was very difficult. So giving them a handset gives them power to have a secure place to save their money. Yes, and also to learn about the products that are coming through. We've been working with a company called Viamo, where messages on farming are sent out to all sorts of areas. So we are considering that we can put value adds into the handsets, where now we begin to stream messages to those areas about different things that can benefit the women. The messages can range from the crop insurance, with the drought, the climate change that we're going through. We've realized that women that are doing small horticulture, farming, vegetables, and the like, they need to be told about climate change insurance. And not only that, also the traditional maize, when to grow, and all the other food crops. So messages are going out on that. You might have heard about a company called Zazu that had developed a financial literacy on the phone. They started putting it in local languages. We also are working to put some of that into local languages so that the women can learn how, basics of financial education on a handset. But those are some of the things that have been attached to the handsets. And last week in a management meeting, we're telling ourselves that we should build other value products as we look for a way to scale up the program. And so would like the women to learn different things using the phones and find them not just as an end to saving, but that they can make money. But I also want to share an experience. Currently, I'm not in Lusaka. I'm in the Eastern Province, some 600 kilometers from Lusaka, where we are training cross-border traders on the Zambia and Malawi border. And we started this today, and the women were hearing about putting money in a wallet before they can travel, because what happens is the women here in Zambia cross over to Malawi to go and buy secondhand clothes as wholesale in big bundles, and they cross back with them. And today we were able to teach them that they can actually put the money in the wallet, and there is an interoperability and the cross-border transfer. On the phone, they can find their money securely under Airtel in the next province, and they were very excited. We also taught them that in Lusaka, the marketeer women do get an information of a price list on the key products every morning, like what's selling at their local markets for how much. So we were telling them about in future, if they can also find out about how much the beans are selling in Malawi, where they get their dried beans, the rice also, and the secondhand clothes. They could actually speak with our suppliers and they would be advising them. Also, in addition, we found that the problem also is to understand the exchange rate. The meeting I'm attending has been organized by German International Aid, GIZ, Z, and the Ministry of Small-Scale Industries and ourselves are facilitating. So we thought, and COMESA Business Council. So we thought we should expose a fintech that can design simple applications to make them find out what an exchange rate is every morning, like what we see in the banks. So we've seen, and these are women, they've been hearing things that they don't know about. They didn't know that they could carry money securely, which was very strange. So there are many things that women can be exposed to. They're also considering a shift from carrying cash to a digitized platform. They can save from it, they can receive information, and that way they can grow their business. So there's much happening, and we're collaborating with others to try and change the behavioral change and the way people look at their money. And this is a very good move.
That is phenomenal. You just outlined 5 different areas that are so important. And when I think about, Tinashe, what you mentioned earlier about knowledge hubs and increasing women in the STEM community and education, that is to me, is such an obvious translation to what Charity was talking about, and what Medha mentioned, of course, in that women not only could be users of these services and devices, but also the providers and the engineers and the the people behind it. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about what UN Women is focusing on in these areas for solutions, just to go a little bit deeper than some of the things you mentioned earlier.
Okay, thanks so much. And yeah, I really like that a lot of the speakers have already touched on a lot of the issues that Zimbabwe is facing. I think, as Southern Africa, the issues are similar, but also quite different. And it's good to know. I'm very interested about the cross-border money transfer that you talked about, Charity. I think that would be very good for even as Zimbabwean women move into Zambia and similarly buy things to come to resell in Zimbabwe. A similar model would be quite good for us as well. But just to talk about what we are engaging in. So with our safe markets, as we move into women transacting within these safe markets, we are also embedding the issue of trainings, particularly on digital finance, but not only to have them engaged in digital space platforms for transactions, but to go beyond just transactions, to also look into areas like getting access to small loans. Some of the mobile providers also provide bridging loans through your mobile phone that do not require anything beyond the registration that you've already given as part of your the registration for your phone. Also taking advantage of opportunities to market. We do have various marketing platforms that do come in with mobile providers and mobile service providers. We do have one called Sasai, a very good platform that pretty much you can sell absolutely anything on it, from something very small to something very big. And we believe that for our women marketers that are engaged in these markets, they can also take advantage of these platforms. Then with our knowledge hubs. So currently we've got knowledge hubs established in the urban poor areas, where particularly with the advent of COVID, we found them being used, for services such as taking part in school. to marketing of produce. So we do believe that with these knowledge hubs, we do have an opportunity to really expand their use, particularly for women traders, and also have trainings that are embedded periodically for women with these knowledge hubs. So with the knowledge hubs also, we plan in the next coming months to roll them out as well in rural areas, so that women that are finding it hard to reach services or opportunities provided by digital platforms can also have access, and also similarly get the trainings that come with them in relation to marketing, trading, loans, finance, digital finance as well. So that's sort of the vision and the goal that we've got at UN Women.
Wonderful. Thank you. Elizabeth, I'd love to hear from a CGAP perspective, just to go a little bit deeper into some of the solutions that you're developing.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I think CGAP's approach is more on the research side. So we carry out a lot of action-oriented research, and we share our insights and knowledge with different financial inclusion stakeholders. So in addition to the work on social norms that I talked about, we've been working a lot to understand and to learn how about women's formal and informal income generating activities that leverage digital solutions. So to understand if there are opportunities for digital financial services to add value to these women's livelihoods. So I don't know, there's this new terminology on informal online commerce. So we did some research on that, and we're finding that women are overrepresented in this space. Women are transacting off Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. And, informal online commerce also has a component of the payment. And we're seeing that more of the payments are being made in cash, but then that means that there's an opportunity to embed digital financial services within the informal online commerce to enable smoother transactions. And I think that's something Medha mentioned in her explanation of some of the solutions that MicroLoan is looking at. On the same breath about the women's digital livelihoods, we're also carrying out research to understand women gig workers, so women on platforms. And one of the insights we've generated is around the kinds of platforms that women are overly active on. So women tend to be more active on personal services and home care kind of platforms like Lakshya in India. And they're less represented in ride-hailing platforms like Uber, SafeBorder. So you find that these sectors are more men-dominated. And so we're seeing that there is an opportunity there to understand women's financial needs on those platforms. And women working in gig work on platforms means that there's a lot of data being generated about their work, their interaction with the platform, and how can then we leverage this data, these digital rails that they're now currently on, to extend appropriate financial services that meet their needs as gig workers and as women. So currently I'm working on, and I'm very passionate about this project. So we are working on piloting a set of innovative digital financial services for women on gig platforms. We're working on savings products, insurance, we're working on credit. And, an interesting insight also on this work is that since women joined platform work, they've opened deposit accounts and mobile money wallets and accounts. And this is sort of pushing women to be more active in the productive economy, and they're also, generating income. So it's part of the solution is looking at how to embed financial services onto online platforms or women's digital livelihoods. Another piece of work that we've done just to highlight an opportunity is work on genderless investing. This is work that I particularly carried out. And an interesting insight is that, 40% of private funding going into genderless investing is being invested in fintechs. And research from the Financial Alliance for Women that was carried out last year on fintechs shows that 80% of fintechs can collect gender disaggregated data, but they do not. So there's also, so that's a missed opportunity for the fintechs who tend to create these digital financial services. And the reasons that they do not collect this data is because they're chasing early adopters. They want to create a bigger user base so that they can attract more investment. And then they end up creating these financial services that truly do not meet the needs of women's digital finance needs, rather. So there's a missed opportunity there to embed or to leverage the fact that fintechs are also on digital rails to generate data to understand women's lives and their financial needs, and then to generate appropriate services. So we are generating all this information, all this data, and working together with different stakeholders in financial inclusion. And we've convened, I think most of us know about the Fin Equity, and it's a global community of practice on gender equity and financial inclusion, and it has its own learning agenda on women's financial inclusion. And we develop knowledge products and convene sessions, even simple sessions like webinars like this, where we discuss what actions need to go into financial inclusion, programming to advance women's financial inclusion. So these are some of the solutions on this is the approach by CGAP and some of the solutions we are thinking about.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And your remarks really just pointed out the fact that for every solution, there's 2 or 3 more questions and other solutions or other issues to be raised and dealt with. So just the mere fact of having the fintech data store not be appropriately mined for a gender disaggregate data is hopefully a missed opportunity maybe today, and that in the future can help further develop more appropriate financial solutions for women that is based in data and actual experience as these continue to get rolled out. I am a little bit conscious of time. We do have a couple of questions. I will say that the questions regarding our location, Uganda, Tanzania, happy to speak with you offline about that. There's obviously a lot going on in those areas. MicroLoan today is not operating in those areas, but we're happy to help you get additional information. One question I did want to make sure that we take is, as women become more financially independent, what's the reaction of men? You talked about gender norms at the very top of your remarks, Elizabeth, and it's a delicate balance because it's a different dynamic when the women in the household have a little bit more independence. So whoever would like to maybe address that question, the backlash, potential backlash from men, feel free to take a moment.
I took some of that today in the sessions because these women that are doing cross-border for this area where we're at, they then become quite powerful women in their wallets, and they do get challenges from their husbands. In fact, they were very glad that we're talking about digital platform to them because they like to control the money. They don't want the men to control the money on their behalf. So they make it clear that they're making the money and putting it in a wallet privately at a given time. gives them a lot of control that they needed. And so it's a very good thing that they now have a digital financial services technology, because after they sell during the day, they leave their takings for the day and put it in the wallet. They somehow say their husbands are supportive if they can share in the budget spent in the home. So the men are appeased by the shopping for groceries that the women carry back home. So the empowerment is enjoyed. It's no longer such a big fight. They quoted that the fact that the men are seeing that we contribute and we take care of some of the concerns, at least we are given support to continue. But they also said we have to create a very amicable environment where they don't outstretch the grace.
That's brilliant, and thank you for sharing that, Charity. Medha, I think you had a comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with her. I think it's quite an interesting question, because when we, for example, from our operation point of view, when we go into a new village or a new area of operation, it requires the buy-in from everybody in the community, including leaders and men. And how we handle those conversations is quite important. We often get men who come and say, oh, why don't you lend to us? And I think what we maintain is lending to women has, transformational benefits for the entire family, because empirically we've seen when you invest in women, women are more likely to put back more into the household in terms of children's education, healthcare, and general well-being. So the way we handle those questions for men is, if the woman in your household benefits, then you stand to benefit alongside the rest of your family. Those conversations are had on an ongoing basis. And I think in terms of I think we're quite conscious that as we move to the digital sort of space and we're doing more of mobile money, that gender gap is not actually worsening. So we can't be complacent with the fact that, okay, we're doing this, we're including women, because some of the inherent characteristics, who owns the mobile phone in the household. Many times within one household, you have people using the same mobile device, and they have different SIM cards because the cost of a mobile phone may be restrictive for some of these families. And how that dictates household choices and household decision making is also very important to understand. So we're going to embed this as part of our social performance management framework, where we do surveys with clients after we've rolled out, particularly in Zambia, where we've rolled it out across most of our branches. It's quite an interesting exercise to see, is this adoption actually leading to other tensions within the household, or is it actually moving in the right direction?
Thank you so much. Given the interest of time, we do need to wrap up. There was one additional question about women in healthcare. How are women involved in healthcare? That's an additional topic which we could take days to discuss. And again, happy to speak with you offline to provide more information or insights where we can. So just to wrap up, we heard from various points of view the core issues that are facing women globally, in sub-Saharan Africa, in individual countries, and in different parts of each country, and the range of solutions that are being looked at, from education and research and data to global solutions such as distributing tens of thousands of handsets, to creating knowledge hubs, to solutions to help individual groups of women and individual women in their businesses in several countries. So clearly you can all see that the issues are broad, but also local. The solutions are broad and also local, and really need to be interconnected. So again, we thank you for joining us today. For MicroLoan Foundation, again, we provide small loans, business training, and digital solutions. On average, our loan is about 80 pounds or $100. So any support that we can provide to women is greatly appreciated and really has a significant impact. As we expand our operations and we focus on digital solutions, we really hope to reach thousands of more women year on year In 2021, we were able to support over 85,000 women with training and small loans for their businesses. And that's a tall order for us to continue to expand upon. So we greatly appreciate your support of the aspiring entrepreneurs in our network as we help them build a better future for their families and over time, a life outside of poverty.